If you say something against the regime, you are taken off for an interrogation, and the consequences of that can be many.
Pregnant women were shot, children were shot, and of course students who started this demonstration.
Candidatura omului care a dat atât patriei și poporului său, civilizației umane și păcii, secretarului general al partidului, tovarășul Nicolae Ceaușescu.
When you think of a country that underwent dictatorship, which is the first country that comes to mind? I'm going to guess you probably went for Germany, or North Korea, or maybe even Italy. However, I bet Romania wasn't one to come to mind. While I was looking at my recommendations on YouTube one day, I stumbled across this video by Penguin History. It greatly sparked my curiosity for the topic of Romania's communist rule as a whole, and prior to it, I've never even heard anything about them having a communist government. I chose to research this topic for my project for those reasons. The Soviet Union took over Eastern Europe, but afterwards it started collapsing, and Romania's leader tried his best to hold on to communism in the country. However, after many strikes and protests, he was overthrown, and the country recovered and became a parliamentary republic, proving a country is able to recover after many struggles. Communism came into Romania in 1945 when the Soviet Union decided to take control. They took over Eastern Europe in order to establish a more secure country, using Eastern Europe for protection against attacks called buffer zones or buffer states, and to help rebuild the economy. These plans took place right after World War II had just ended. During the Second World War, Romania had been allied with Nazi Germany, which persuaded the country to establish a fascist party in the government, the party being the Iron Guard, and the prime minister being Ion Antonescu. Antonescu formed a very good alliance with Germany, helping them attack enemies like the USSR in 1941, and even establishing Jewish extermination programs, just like the Nazis. In 1944, Antonescu was overthrown, and Romania joined the Allied powers just a year before the end of the war. The country was free from fascism, right? Wrong! Due to Romania being in the area the Soviet Union wanted to create buffer zones in, communism rose very quickly. The Romanian Communist Party, RCP, was actually established in 1921, but it finally started gaining attraction during this time. Eventually, the monarchy was abandoned, and it became the Romanian People's Republic. It also became involved with the USSR, but they acted alone. A man named Gorky Gorkidej led it for a while, paving his successor's path of actions, which we'll get into in a little bit, before passing away in 1965. Then another man took over, a very big supporter of communism and socialism. He spoke of nationalism and individualism, and he just happens to be in the center of what we'll be discussing from here on out. His name is Nicolae Ceaușescu. People actually praised Ceaușescu at first, calling him names like conducător, which means leader in Romanian, and other names glorifying him. They loved him. He was against the Soviet Union, criticizing Moscow and other areas due to their actions. He further averted Romania's economic specialization from agriculture to industry, finishing what Gorkidej had begun, which worked for a little bit. The economy ended up collapsing due to Romania's heavy amount of foreign debt. They borrowed things heavily from other countries to hopefully build an oil network. But then a big oil shock happened. They kept going on like it was nothing, rapidly industrializing, and they ended up paying repercussions for that. However, instead of Ceaușescu devoting himself and his government and the people into fixing the economy, the consequences were only deflected onto the people. This caused a huge decrease in the standard of living, as well as conditions for the bourgeoisie, the middle class, and the proletariat, the working class. Ceaușescu forced heavy rationing, and he exported almost everything for the country. Before Ceaușescu came into power, Gorkidej established a secret police called the Securitate that silenced anyone that went against the regime. And during this period, Ceaușescu definitely took advantage of them. Crops were failing, earthquakes were happening, and pro-natalist policies were heavily applied, banning abortions, monitoring pregnancies, and punishing those who didn't finish the process. While all this was going on, Ceaușescu and his little group of elites were thriving. They didn't give a crap about the rest of the country. Him and his wife Elena bought expensive clothing, jewelry, cars, you name it. They had several houses across the country, as well as secret bank accounts with money stolen from Romania's treasury, hidden from the outside. There were protests, and there were strikes, and the people tried to get Ceausescu to help. Around 1989, socialist and communist regimes were collapsing across Eastern Europe, which greatly terrified Ceausescu. He did not want to lose his power. On December 15, 1989, an interview took place with the guy who criticized Ceausescu, and he was later evicted from his home in Timișoara. Many people gathered the next few days, heavily protesting against Ceausescu, to the point he called a state of emergency in the city, ordering all the protesters to be shot. In 5 days of brutal fighting, 72 people died and hundreds were injured. After this, a bunch more people joined protests, demanding the military to get off the streets. And when they finally achieved what they wanted, Timișoara was proclaimed a free city. More and more protests came up, and people absolutely hated Ceausescu at this point. All the glorifying disappeared. To clear up everything, Ceausescu decided to hold a rally in Bucharest on December 21st, and about 50,000 people showed up. It was broadcasted live on national television. After people waited in the cold for 5 hours, he finally came out. After his speech ended, nobody left. They started protesting and going through the streets, again shouting "Down with Ceausescu" in other terms. Military opened fire, and by the end there was so much blood on the streets they had to hose it down to clean it up. The next day, Ceausescu thought it was finally over. But then the police sent to monitor the protests actually joined. The protesters began to surround the main headquarters and break in. This caused Ceausescu to immediately try and flee with his wife, but they were caught and turned in. They were held in military barracks for a few days before later being put on trial for everything that they had done. They were both found guilty and were charged, with their punishment being death by firing squad. Both Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife Elena were executed on December 25th, and their bodies were shown on television. This marked the end of dictatorship in the country. In May 1990, Romania held their first free election in over 50 years. They worked hard rebuilding the nation, joining international organizations like NATO and the European Union. Leaders helped fix the damages caused by communism. Today, they have a parliamentary democracy, and compared to the other countries around the world, they are ranked in the top 50 with the best economy. Romania certainly has a bit of dark history, but they've proven you can always bounce back. They went from allying with Nazi Germany to completely ridding of anything even remotely close to fascism. They went through monarchy, to a dictatorship, to a democracy. It goes to show there's always a way to make things better.